Hello and welcome to the Geek Pantheon. I am Eric, and today we are going to be talking about rolling for stats, that very controversial concept that many dungeon masters just scoff at and optimizers roll their eyes. But I have a special guest joining me today, Sara, TheHypeGoblin, everywhere, TheHypeGoblin everywhere. Just if you search TheHypeGoblin, you'll find her. D&D player, cosplayer, dungeon master, and genuinely one of the funniest people I've come across in the tabletop RPG space. So thank you, Sara, for coming to join me on the channel.
Oh, gosh, I feel like I should say something funny now. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Hi.
I'm glad to have you here. Yes. So this whole video concept came about when I had found your channel and was watching one of your character creation Q&As. And you talked about one of your characters, Delilah, who, having watched, gone down the rabbit hole that is your TikTok, I desperately want to play in a game alongside Delilah. She seems like a wonderful ball of chaos to exist beside. But you actually rolled for her stats. And I just to fill in people on this channel that maybe haven't seen your channel, go ahead and tell that story, I guess.
So I actually roll all my character stats. I don't like point buy unless I'm told that I have to do point buy or I have to do like standard array. Like I don't do it. Yeah. I go in and I roll for my stats every time. And when I was rolling for her, I was actually going into a game where the power gamer in my gamer group was actually going to be the DM. And when I saw how absolutely abysmally that I rolled with her stats, I thought, you know what would be fun is if I troll my friend with my character and I show up really wanting to play her, because he wasn't about to tell me no. He's far too nice for that. So I rolled up with this character. I had a negative constitution modifier. I had a negative in intelligence and a negative in wisdom.
Wonderful.
Yeah. It was so much fun though. So much fun. She was fantastic.
That's outstanding. And I mean, I recommend everyone your Instagram and TikTok. You can find Delilah all over that those accounts, and just sounds so wonderful. But you know, I think that a lot of players and you know, especially newer players or intermediate players, like might really balk if they see like, I'm going to have 3 negative modifiers on a character, and the impulse might be to go to their dungeon master and be like, please let me try again.
When I first started on TikTok, I posted her stats on TikTok. And people, that was one of my first viral videos, because D&D TikTok was appalled that I was playing with those stats. And I was like, I'm having fun.
Yeah. That's the name of the game, right? So yeah, I guess I want to start off talking about like taking those characters that you roll an abysmal stat that is potentially like something like Constitution or Wisdom, especially like how to have fun with that still, and how to, you know, really, I guess, allow that to inform how you play the character, how you kind of write the backstory for the character, and things like that. So with Delilah, I mean, outside of wanting to troll your friend, which is always a good motivation for anything. But I guess how did the stats kind of inform the character that you ended up playing?
So with Delilah, I basically ended up playing with her because a lot of people made the comments with like, oh, well, with a negative wisdom, negative constitution, like that, like they made very mean comments about how smart and how intelligent she should be, which the thing about your stats is your stats, that's not who your character is. That's just your probability of how successful you'll be on a roll. Yeah. That's all that is. So I never play my stats as, oh, my character has a negative intelligence modifier or low intelligence modifier. They're dumb. They're not dumb. There's things they're good at. I actually played her as, she had a very high charisma score. And I played her, and she had a very high dex score. So I played her as she was a rogue, but she would never admit she was a rogue because her parents always wanted her to be a cleric. She got kicked out of cleric school. And so she was making money as a bard like her dad. So her shtick was, oh, I'm just a bard. but she knew how to pick locks. She could.
Yep.
She had all of like the rogue abilities, and it was actually her stats were going to get better over time, and it was actually a build by Nerd Immersion that I was doing, where you get proficiency in like every single skill set by the time you hit like level 17, I think, based on like what feats and stuff you take. So she was able to improve without those stats necessarily having to go up. And it was a lot of fun because she was just the dumb young kid who bit off more than she could chew, adventuring with this party, who had no business being in combat, but was just so gung ho and so determined that she was going to be an adventurer. She was going to go have an adventure. She was going to fight monsters. She was going to make a lot of gold. But man, if we didn't have a Twilight cleric with that channel divinity that gave you temp HP, she would not have survived session 2.
That can be a boon. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did a one shot a few years back where I decided to just take the roll for stats idea and crank it up to 11, where instead of rolling 3d6, I rolled a d20. And just, and I also did it in order and then picked the race and class based off of the array that I got. Because, nobody wants to play a wizard with like a 2 intelligence. Like that's just not going to be a good time for anybody. But it was so fun because I ended up with like a kobold sorcerer that had a -4 constitution modifier. And so it was just skin and bones and like, could barely stay standing half the time. And so actually rode in basically a Bjorn on the back of like the Fearbold who had a like -5 charisma. And so basically the player that ended up playing him just played him as like not being able to communicate clearly at all. And so they developed this symbiotic relationship of like, I'm always here with you. So together we can truck through the world. And like those two players who did not know each other before the one shot started walked away just having had the time of their lives together. They actually rearranged seating around the table so they could sit next to each other. And it was just wonderful. And I think that that's one thing that, when you step away from optimization and the mechanical side of D&D and look at really the narrative, looking at your strengths as being those places where you can find how you rely on your fellow party members, like you talked about mechanically with the Twilight Domain cleric. But, having one of the characters that I play currently is Ari, who has a 16 intelligence, but a negative wisdom modifier. So I play him as just, he knows a lot of stuff. And he has the worst decision-making process imaginable. Like he's all id. And we have the barbarian in the party who is very much the opposite. And so when they sit down to have a conversation, there's so much give and take between them of like, Ari learning like, oh yeah, maybe those were poor. I was communicating poorly and also not listening to anybody because I know I'm right, but that's not how you interact with other people. And so narratively, it can create these really interesting and meaningful relationships when you identify your character's biggest weaknesses through the stats and picking that ball up and running with it.
Absolutely.
Do you have any other examples of letting those things develop the relationships in the party?
Yeah, I mean, I have with Delilah, obviously, like she relied a lot on her party members to help her out. She became a pretty heavy hitter as the campaign went on. We only went up to level, I think, like 10 or 11 for that campaign, and then schedules, happened. Which
a D&D game running into scheduling problems? What?
Yeah. I think because I don't try to min-max months. I min-maxed once with my death cleric, and I didn't have nearly as much fun. So I just ended up like, she left the Raven Queen service and she's doing something else now because I wanted to mix it up.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, every time I create a character, I always look for what their weakness is. And I'll invent a weakness for them if they don't really have it based on what I rolled. I play a wizard warlock multi-class on Sunday mornings on my Twitch channel. And
link down below.
she and she's a wizard who hates being a wizard because
Excellent.
I wanted to play around with, well, what does a young person who was forced to learn the magic that they have act like, but they can't sit still long enough to want to do it. Like it's physically painful for her to sit down and read a book. So she actually multi-classed into Warlock on a whim. My DM didn't even realize that they were heading down, like offering me a Warlock path in that conversation. And then it just kind of came out of their mouth and we were like, yeah, let's do this. Awesome. And that's led to some really cool storytelling because it was with a character in the story that was very closed off, that has had to open up because she's dealing with my young and dumb Warlock who thinks she's tough shit, but really isn't. In that campaign, we also have a character who started out with equal levels in Barbarian and Artificer and played a very, very intelligent Barbarian, which hardly anyone does.
Yeah.
And it's been a really interesting story to tell for that character because as he's moved on with the party and he's found healing, as we've leveled, that player has actually stepped back those Barbarian levels to kind of show the representation of that healing. And they're leaning more and more into Artificer. And I think now she's down to just like 1 or 2 levels for his character.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but I think it's a lot more fun when your character has more opportunities to fail than succeed. Yeah. Because the really good story, it always comes from the failures.
Yeah.
Like all of the great successful people we hear about in the real world. Because I know a lot of people in D&D, they're all about the realism. They want the realism in their game with dragons and magic.
Yep.
But realistically, your advancement comes from failure. So if you want that realistic feeling and you want to play someone who feels real, give them stats that aren't optimal. Give them flaws. Give them things that they can't do, and have them figure out ways to work around it, work past it, work with the party to achieve their goals. And you'll have a lot of fun telling that story. Yeah. You will not be upset that you're telling that story.
Absolutely. I guess that's a great pivot into kind of the next category of conversation of, we talked about when you're rolling for stats and really get a lot of less than optimal rolls. But what about the inverse of, before we hit the record, I was telling Sarah about my home game where most of my players rolled remarkably well. Good for them. And granted, I modify rolling for stats to benefit. I let everyone roll 4d6 and drop the lowest die on every roll, and I let them roll 7 times and drop the lowest score. So I really massage things to give them a chance to succeed. But how do you take a character that could suffer from, I guess, what a lot of people might call the Superman syndrome, where you're awesome at everything, great, good job. Where do you inject weakness and interesting character bits when mechanically looking at the character sheet, those things don't necessarily exist from a mechanical standpoint?
You give them things to deal with that have absolutely nothing to do with their stats.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. You lean so hard into the storytelling and into the role play that, I mean, you might have a persuasion roll. You might have you might need to do some history rolls because typically people don't beef up history and like their Arcana check rolls. So have them need to know those things to succeed. Give them a story where they have to figure out a mystery and they're not necessarily, punching everything that comes their way. Give them political intrigue. Political intrigue is so much fun when it's done good. It's so much fun. One of my, with the character that I had min-maxed that I wasn't having a lot of fun with before I switched over, one of my favorite storylines that we did was, it was after a major battle. And we went into this city with one of our allies who had been in that battle with us. And we were visiting the king because he had fought alongside us in the war. And there was we fought against corruption in that story. there were advisors that weren't informing this king of what was actually going on in his city. And we saw it firsthand. And we took the time to build up that part of the city to empower the people living in that area. And we had a very fantastic story that had absolutely nothing to do with any of the things that we were good at rolling.
Yeah.
It was all, we were walking in and talking to the different NPCs, and we were finding out what they needed. And we were investigating who was really holding on to the purse strings, what the political intrigue plot was. That was probably one of the most fun things that we have done yet in that campaign.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah. I think running with the political intrigue aspect of it, from a story standpoint, like giving disparate factions that are all right and all justified can be a compelling thing for a powerful party or a powerful character like forcing them to start making decisions can really also remove them from the mechanical aspects of their character. And, even if they have an 18 or a 20 wisdom, it's like, okay, we can roll dice until we're blue in the face, but eventually you as the player are going to have to like make a call on which side you're going to back and what you're going to do. And I think that also when you have, at least for me, when I am playing to my character's strengths, I allow myself to get stubborn and, kind of righteous, like Ari, my character who has a very high intelligence, like most of the time he thinks he's the smartest person in the room, and that can be very grating for a lot of people, and that can cause negotiation or conflict resolution and things to turn sour. So this thing that is a strength of his, like he is a very intelligent person, but it can have a negative effect on how he communicates with people, how he relates to people. And I think also that can play for somebody that has an 18 or 20 strength of, sorry, like punching stuff isn't going to solve this problem. So you need to, and if you try to do that, you're only going to make things worse. And I think that even if you had somebody that had 18 plus across the board, presenting them with political intrigue or decisions having to be made and like really narrative heavy stuff can be very compelling and can be very difficult, because I know plenty of villains, like bad guys, that would have a 18 intelligence or an 18 strength or 18 wisdom, because you are very smart or very wise doesn't mean you aren't going to end up on a bad side of something. And so having a very powerful player character contend with what does it mean to bear this power in a way that's good can be a very interesting story to tell for a powerful PC.
I think too, teaching your players that there's more ways than just using their fists to get through an encounter is also the mark of a really good DM, because the majority of the encounters that we face in one of my DM's campaigns, this is now the second campaign that she's run for this group. She's very good at giving us opponents that, I mean, we still have some that are just like, it's an ooze. You're not going to reason with an ooze.
Yeah.
But she also gives us dragons, and we've met enough of her dragons that we met a dragon whose horde is an apple orchard, and they sell the apples at a fair price to the local village in this symbiotic relationship. They don't care about the gold that they're getting.
Yeah.
But they have a surplus from their horde that's just going to go to waste. We've met celestial creatures that she's introducing into the world that are like I'm trying to think of what it is. It's not elementals, like celestial elementals that she's introducing into the world as her way of explaining like celestial warlocks and that sort of thing. And we had a player who's new to our group wanting to run up and fight this thing, and we were like, no, this is new.
Yeah.
It's intelligent. We can talk to it. Like, you don't understand. So I think getting your players excited about talking to things and negotiating with things is also another way to deal with parties that have very strong punchy characters, and also characters that, if it's a little unbalanced, if you have one player who's the min-maxer, that's fine.
Yeah.
As long as they respect the fact that everyone else wants to negotiate, which in my party, like that's what we have. And we love it. We love our min-maxer in my party.
Yeah.
Makes our job easy when there is a fight.
Yeah. Just throw them at the problem. And then,
Literally. They're a Warforged. We have literally thrown them at the problem before.
Oh, that's awesome. So my favorite setting to run in is Eberron. That's the only setting I've run in. And one of the reasons I love it so much is because one of the first games that I was running for a new group of players, there was an experienced player in there, but they came across some goblins around a campfire camping out, and you could kind of see the way the winds were shifting, and I'd stopped them and said, well, in Eberron, these are just like people on a camping trip to you. Like it's not like you might want to try talking to them. Goblins aren't just cannon fodder. And that's one thing I love, is because you get to have so many more opportunities for the players and the player characters to think, okay, how can we handle this problem outside of that? And I do think your point to the min-maxer is also a good thing to acknowledge, that I've heard the axiom for dungeon masters before of kick them in the dump stat, where if a player is, you want to present problems that will be a struggle for your player characters, but at the same time, it's fun to use the tools that you're good with. And so, while it's fun to make them contend with these super powerful things, it is possible to overdo it as a dungeon master and be like, I built this really cool character for combat. It would be cool if, we could come across something that I could kill without having to have a moral crisis about it. Like, that might be fun every once in a while.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between challenging your player every once in a while and just being mean because of the character they built.
Yeah.
And I mean, as long as everyone's okay with that player being a min-maxer at the table. And I mean, this is why session zeros are so important. Yeah. Like, just talk about what your character is, what they can do, and what you're planning on doing with them. Because my friend who min-maxes, that's like where his joy is. And we love him so much. We're not going to tell him like, no, you can't do this. You have to just play, like, you can't multi-class. You have to just play one class. And no, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to watch him take down a dragon in one punch and then just start giggling. Like, it's great. And we're all fine with it. So I think the only time min-maxers really become a problem is when there's not communication at the table about what you're looking for.
Yeah. And when players start to get in each other's way, where like it's clear that the min-maxer wants to get into combat, but the role players want to keep talking, and when that communication breakdown happens, that can be. And you can be a min-maxer and be a role player. Yeah, those aren't exclusive. Absolutely. One of the people that was in the very first campaign that I ever played in was an excellent role player. The character that he built, his character was a female tiefling that wanted to found a kingdom for tieflings because they didn't have a home and, as a people and all this stuff. And she could also, take out 20 enemies with a single blast because it was 4th edition and that was the type of game everybody was playing. But yeah, like you're saying, it's not two exclusive camps. And I do have to laugh a little bit when roleplay heavy players tell min-maxers they're playing the game wrong, because it's like, I feel like you've become the very thing that you've wished to destroy. So yeah. We've already kind of started pivoting into that, but DMing for games where we're flowing well. We're talking about the things before we actually jump into the topic. So DMing for a game where you are having your players roll for stats, which is my preferred game to run. I love doing that. And so, but the obvious, I'm not going to call it a downside. It's more of a feature than a bug, but you can get some pretty wide swings in the discrepancy between individual stats of a single character, but then also characters in entirety. You could have somebody that rolls crazy well, somebody that rolls very poorly. And how do you plan games? How do you run games when you have a wider discrepancy between the player power levels? I
mean, I'm honest with the tables.
Yeah.
So if someone is a little more powerful, and be like, okay, this character's a little more powerful than everyone else, we're going to keep that in mind as we go along. But for the most part, I don't really plan differently based on how people roll or what character they bring to the table. I look more for, I ask people, what kind of game are you looking for? Are you looking for something that's just a dungeon crawl slog? Like, is that what you want? Do you want opportunities to role play? Do you want 50% combat, 50% role play? Do you want mostly role play? Are you okay if we don't roll a single die in a session and it's just y'all at a tavern having a chat, or you're out and you're visiting the shops and you're going shopping? Like, what sort of things are you guys looking for? And I usually take that feedback as ongoing feedback with a system called Stars and Wishes. I don't know if you're familiar with that as like a post-game process. But basically it's a way to normalize getting feedback, because that's one of the things as DMs that we always want, but people are so uncomfortable about saying that, like, well, I didn't like this, or I didn't like that. Like, they don't want to hurt your feelings because you are putting in a lot of work and a lot of effort to do this game for everyone. But we need to know that people are having fun and that you want to see what's in game. So a system that I use, and I don't know where it came from. I learned about it on another Twitch channel that I joined. And I haven't been able to track down who originally started it, but basically Stars and Wishes is you go around the table after the session and everyone says the things that they enjoyed about the session and what they'd like to see for either in the next session or in future sessions. And it's not necessarily like a good versus bad feedback system, but it does open the door for communication, and it makes for a lot better relationships both at the table and outside of the table with players. An example is we do it at every table on my channel. It's just a standard part of my practice. And so a standard session may be, I really liked that scene that I had with your character. That felt really good, really engaging. I really liked watching so-and-so and so-and-so when they were out shopping and they interacted with that shopkeeper and they said that funny thing. That was really cool. And I really enjoyed the way the DM voiced the kobold. I thought that was really funny. It reminded me of Steve Buscemi. I thought it was great. My wishes for next session, I'd like to have a scene with, we'll make our fake friend Steven. I'd like to have a scene with Steven's character because something came up a couple sessions ago and I'd like for our characters to talk about it and have that bonding moment. And I'd also, maybe eventually like to touch on if the party would be okay with going to so-and-so. There's something in my backstory and I'd like to just, visit that part of the world for like a session or two. Obviously nothing that has to, the session with Steven is going to be something that is like immediately actionable that we can do in the next session. And I want to go somewhere in your world is something that the DM can then plan for. And it's not going to be next session, but it's going to be, it can be put in the pipeline and they know, okay, this player wants to go here. And everyone else at the table is nodding yes. Okay, everyone wants to go there. And then you just go around the table and everyone gets that moment. And it's really great. And it's one of those things that I find that when toes do get stepped on, because sometimes that happens in games, it's just a part of the game. Usually people bring it up at that time and they're comfortable enough that that during their wishes, they'll just say, hey, we came across this today in game and that didn't feel good. That hit wrong. I didn't stop it in the moment, but I'd prefer we didn't, I'd prefer that we didn't have anything that resembled a horse as an opponent in combat. That's just like, that's hitting really wrong because I love horses and fighting a nightmare. It didn't sit well with me, that imagery or something like that. And it's a way to just take care of people and make sure that they're seeing what they want in game. So I tend to do a lot of that.
No, I love that.
As far as like balancing encounters, that the worst thing that 5e does is balance encounters. I have had players breeze through a deadly encounter and nearly get TPK'd by a easy encounter. So it's all in the dice. And I honestly, I really try not to think about the game from that aspect too hard. I just say, would this be fun? Yeah, it's going to entertain me. We'll see if they like it. And I throw it in the game.
If not, they'll let me know after the session. Yeah, no, that's great. I love that Stars and Wishes.
Mm-hmm.
I might no, I will be stealing that, just so you know.
No, do it. Steal from me. Take
Yeah.
every good nugget that I have stolen from someone else. Please take it.
Absolutely. The one thing that I would say, and I try to do in combat encounters, especially if I have somebody that has either rolled very poorly for those kind of combat centric stats, the strength, dex, con, or somebody that has just intentionally built a character that is not made for combat. My character Ari, his two highest scores are charisma and intelligence, and it's become a running gag that a combat with our party isn't a real combat with our party unless Ari's gone down at least twice. So typically, as a dungeon master, I will have the monsters that I'm controlling, the enemies that I'm controlling, operate with the mindset of cutting off the snake's head. Like, we go after the most powerful, who we perceive to be the strongest, and then maybe the others will flee. Very much what player characters often do, of like, oh, that one's clearly the boss, let's take them out first, and then the others will take off and we won't have to deal with them. And so I oftentimes will play my enemies that way. That way they are, not focus firing necessarily, but definitely if I have a min-maxer in the group, they are getting the brunt of the damage and the focus, which they're going to love. And also they're probably going to have the most enemies concentrated on them, so they'll get to use all of their toys and do all of their fun things. And everyone else can still be involved with the combat and still be engaged with it, but maybe not feel like their intentional choices from a mechanical standpoint are being punished, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So that's typically, it's if you have a party full of like combat focused characters, though, you can flip that script and have them go after the weakest ones, try to whittle them down. But if it's not D&D, but I'm playing a character in the One Ring RPG system, in Lord of the Rings Middle Earth, and I basically made Rachel Weisz's character from The Mummy. Like, they're a librarian, and they love stories, and they want to learn about more stories, and they want to go into these horribly dangerous places in order to learn more stories. And the last session that we had, we walked into this tower that like is haunted, and all the townspeople refuse to go near it. And my character just walks into it without a care in the world, and the DM starts describing what I see, and it's very clear that there are 3 of the 9 ring wraiths standing there, statues still with swords, and as a player the color is going out of my face like, oh no, but at the same time for my character they're like, it's probably statues, it's probably fine, nobody's been in this tower before, I really want to go up to the 2nd floor. And our dwarf fighter is like has them by like the scruff of their collar, like, no, we are leaving right now, please, let's go. And so in combat scenarios, if my character were getting focus fired, I'm just going to die. Like, I have not built a combat character in any capacity. And so, I think as a DM, allowing your players to, giving players other things to do in combat can also be really helpful. Like having a puzzle to solve or a skill challenge going on while the more combat focused characters are fighting can also be a way of allowing everybody to shine in a combat encounter through non-combat stuff. Can be a lot of fun for both the DM and the players. One of my favorite sessions I've ever run was the party split, which anybody that says never split the party has never had a session that's gone wonderfully awry because the party split up.
Split the party. Do it.
Split the party.
It's so much fun.
They were on basically a cruise ship, and I was running for, I think, 6 or 7 people at the time. But 2 pairs went off together and the other 3 just split up. They went all over the ship, and this was a pre-written adventure. And so there were triggers all over the ship for different encounters. And of course, through no knowledge of their own, they sprung all of them at the same time. And so I was having to run a social encounter over here with a character and a combat encounter with these 2 and a puzzle with this one. And it was one of the funnest sessions of D&D I've ever got to run. And it was purely accidental. And everybody had a blast, partially because they could see the sweat dripping off my brow of like trying to keep all of the plates spinning. But it can be so much fun to have everybody playing to their strengths at the same time, even if those strengths are so wildly disparate.
Absolutely.
That can be awesome.
And I mean, if you're really concerned as a DM about your players, like, you can also drop them specific loot.
Yep. Yeah.
That's another thing too that my DMs have done is when I was playing Delilah, my DM actually crafted weapons specifically for her, and they were just fantastic.
Yeah.
like they made her hit so much harder. And they probably wouldn't have done that without her being as weak as she was.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, I don't know. It's just so fun to, I especially love a very diverse and distinct party in terms of skill sets. Like I love running for specialist parties where you have somebody that, you know, has very much focused in the social aspects of the game, and somebody else that's like the exploration focus and combat, and you get those interactions with the different ways that problems should be handled and stuff like that. And I think that's one of the reasons I like rolling for stats, is it gives people a greater opportunity to be a specialist with their character.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I'm sure there's somebody out there that has literally rolled like 6 14s when they roll for stats. And it's like, well, okay. But, you know, and that's where you start looking at the narrative to kind of tell your story. But Sara, this has been a wonderful discussion, and I have gotten so much out of it. Stars and Wishes is coming to a table near you, to all of my players that are watching this. But why don't you tell all of the people, all the places that they can find you? I'll have links for everything down below, but go ahead and plug all your things.
Yeah, you can find me all over the internet. I am on Twitch, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Hover, which is a new thing.
Okay.
Ko-Fi, all over the place, under TheHypeGoblin. Just Google me and they're all going to come. They all come right up one after another. Yeah. I do a lot of, cosplay centered, content on social media surrounding my characters and the campaigns that I'm playing them in publicly. So you'll see my characters switch up a lot. I am covering both Dungeons and Dragons and VTM right now with those characters. I'm also getting ready to launch a new Monera game over on my Twitch channel. So that character will be coming to a TikTok and Instagram near you sometime soon. Excellent. Yeah, you can find me playing just regular video games. Today I was streaming Stardew Valley. I also have a Discord server, so if you ever want to come talk to me about character creation and about my ideas on it, you're more than welcome to come there. I'll provide you with the link to that as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But yeah, y'all, yeah, that's that. I'm everywhere. Great. I do have a lot.
Well, and as soon as I think of another reason to get you on the channel, we will absolutely do this again, because it's been wonderful talking with you and just sharing D&D stories, even before we started recording. So thank you all. Fun. Yeah. Thank you all so much for watching. Links to everything down below, both my stuff, Sara's stuff. Go click all of the engagement buttons and go check out TheHypeGoblin on YouTube as well as everywhere else. And we will see you next time.